official. Welcome and good evening to everyone. Welcome to the third session of our 2026 Plastic Advocates webinar series. My name is Dana Ripper. I'm with the Missouri River Bird Observatory, or MRBO. Also with us tonight is my co-founder and co-director of MRBO, Ethan Duke. We are very happy to see folks here. So far in this webinar series, we've heard about the history of plastic and how we've gotten to this crisis point as far as production and pollution. We've heard about this disastrous effects that so much contact that we have with plastic, that contact has on our health. I just want to make a note, if you missed those sessions, they're already up on the MRBO YouTube channel, which is just at Mo River Bird Obs. We're recording all the sessions and we'll post them within a few days of broadcast. Here at MRBO, our mission is the conservation of birds and all wildlife and their habitats through science, education, and advocacy. We've been working on the issue of plastic for about 6 years now, and I definitely want to give a shout out to our awesome partner, Missouri Stream Teams United, with whom we are in the midst of a 3-year plastic reduction project that is funded by the Missouri Foundation for Health. And I'm going to put a couple of links to both of our organizations' website in the chat for you if you want to look a little bit more at the Missouri project specifically. I know we have people from all over tuning in tonight, maybe more than ever before actually, but if you are in Central or Northeast Missouri or the St. Louis area, we have several in-person events coming up soon. On March 10th, I am delighted and honored to be giving a presentation to the Ethical Society of St. Louis as part of their Tuesday Women's Association International Relations Lecture Series. This presentation will focus on the global issues associated with plastic and the positive movement around the world towards reducing plastic production. We also have 2 community advocacy workshops coming up where we engage in both background training on the topic and interactive discussions with the goal of organizing locally. And these are going to be in Marshall, Missouri on the evening of Wednesday, March 18th, and at the Mark Twain Lake Boudreaux Visitor Center on Saturday, March 28th. So I'm going to put all of this in the chat right now as well. Dates and links. Hopefully everyone can see those. Okay, and now right on to our webinar of this evening. We are delighted to welcome tonight's speaker, an accomplished and effective advocate from our neighboring state of Illinois. Jacquelyn Casazza is a community organizer whose practical approach is to meet people where they are, inspiring personal awareness and action. As a mom and outdoor runner, she sees firsthand how plastic pollution impacts our health and the health of our planet, driving her to learn more and to take action. She believes that anyone can become an environmental advocate at any time, no matter where they are on their green journey. Jacquelyn uses this insight to inspire others. She is the president and co-founder of Go Green Glen, Ellyn, a community nonprofit with a mission to help residents and businesses be greener through education, advocacy, and volunteering. She presents frequently to school and community groups. She is also a Village of Glen Ellyn environmental commissioner and sits on the Glen Ellyn Park District Resident Environmental Advisory Board. Jacquelyn also serves as an issue specialist on waste for the League of Women Voters Illinois and is an active and committed member of the Coalition for Plastic Reduction, which works to reduce single-use plastic waste in Illinois through policy and legislation. Prior to her environmental work, Jacquelyn spent 16 years at Deloitte and holds a BS from Vanderbilt University. She and her husband live in Glen Ellyn with their 2 school-age children. When she's not working to protect the planet, she loves to explore it through books, travel, and music. Thank you so much for being here, Jacquelyn, and the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Dana, for the introduction. And hi, everyone. My name is Jacquelyn Casazza. I'm thrilled to be here tonight as the 3rd speaker in the 2026 Plastics Learning Series. And tonight I'm going to be talking about tackling plastics through local action. So just a little bit about me before we get started. So I live in Glen Ellyn, Illinois. We're about 40 miles west of the city with my husband and my 2 sons. I've always had a lifelong interest in the environment and serving the community. But it was when I became a mom that I became, kind of increasingly concerned and also curious about all these environmental challenges that are out there. That led me to start Go Green Glen Ellyn, which is a not-for-profit based here in Glen Ellyn. We're about 4 years old, and our mission is to help Glen Ellyn residents and businesses be greener through education, advocacy, and action. And I also serve on the Village of Glen Ellyn Environmental Commission. Outside of my community, I have a couple national and state projects that I like to work on. So I'm a member of the National Volunteer Speakers Bureau for Beyond Plastics, which you may have heard about. They're a national not-for-profit aimed at reducing single-use plastic waste and pollution. I'm also serve as a waste specialist for the League of Women Voters Illinois. So we are focused on legislation in Illinois that specifically tackles waste. And so we look a lot at bills that are aimed at reducing, again, single-use plastics in Illinois. And I serve on the Coalition for Plastic Reduction, which is a group here in Illinois of about 40 different organizations, for-profit, nonprofit, community groups, faith-based organizations, all of us working together to champion and advance legislation in Illinois that's aimed at reducing single-use plastic waste. So as you can probably tell, I spent a lot of time thinking about and talking about plastic pollution. There's many environmental challenges out there, but my passion project is trash. And I love talking trash because one reason I think is it's really something that affects everyone. We interact with waste multiple times a day. So that gives us lots of opportunities for learning and also lots of opportunities for making different decisions and taking different actions. So here is the rundown of what I'm going to go through tonight. So I know this webinar is a series, and hopefully you have been able to attend the previous sessions with the fabulous Rebekah, Creshkoff, and Megan Wolff. But in case you haven't, I'm just going to spend a few minutes level setting to start with a little information about what plastic is and kind of what is the problem with plastic and why it is that we need to be taking this local action. And then I'm going to go through a number of examples of things that you can do in your communities to tackle this massive problem. So we'll start very basic here. What is plastic? It's made from fossil fuels and any number of chemical additives. There's over 16,000 different chemical additives that we know of today that can be used to make plastic. Now, those additives can make it red, make it blue, make it stretchy, squishy, soft, hard, any number of different properties. And we all know that plastic is an incredibly versatile material, and there's no question that we do need some of this material for some things in our lives. For example, I don't think most people would feel safe flying in a plane with glass windows instead of plexiglass. And I don't think most parents would feel safe to strap their child into a car seat that was made from cardboard. But the problem is that nearly half of all plastic production is not for durable goods like airplane parts or car seats. It's for single-use things like packaging that's thrown away after only one use. So the material of plastic itself is actually fundamental to understanding the plastic problem because plastic is designed to last forever, but it's used only temporarily. And in fact, virtually every piece of plastic ever produced is still on this earth. Now, that might seem very surprising to you because we hear so much about recycling plastic. And it seems like so many plastic things, have this little chasing arrow symbol on it, so we can recycle it. But that's not really the case. So globally, less than 9% of all plastic is recycled. And in the US, that rate is even lower. It's closer to 5 or 6%. Now, those numbers might seem surprising because, again, we all see these chasing arrows, and it seems like all we're told to do is recycle. But plastic is complex and difficult to recycle for a number of reasons. So one, plastic degrades in quality when it's recycled. Something like an aluminum can, you can recycle it over and over infinitely, and it just becomes an aluminum can again. But plastic degrades in quality after 1 or 2 uses. I'm not sure how well you can see on the Zoom, but this is a plastic bottle made from recycled plastic, which is great, but it has a little bit of a grayish tinge. So that's what happens, the quality and the color can degrade. So often plastic is actually downcycled. It's not turned back into the same thing. It's turned into something of lesser value. So additionally, many forms of plastic like straws, forks, lids, chip bags, candy wrappers, pens, sunglasses, freezer food bags. I'm sure you can name a million things made from plastic that you can't put in your recycling bin. Pretty much only rigid containers like bottles and jugs are desirable for recycling and turning into something else. And then finally, virgin plastic costs practically nothing. And is often much easier for manufacturers to deal with than recycled plastic. So all of this makes plastic recycling not only technically difficult, but also economically impractical. And we are currently producing too much plastic to rely on recycling alone to manage our plastic waste and pollution problems. Now, this brings me to what I think is the real problem with plastic. Now, the volume is alarming, but the real problem with plastic is not necessarily the plastic itself, but it is the pollution. And I present a lot to school groups, and I like to define for the kids, pollution is something hazardous that ends up where we don't want it to be. So there's lots of forms of pollution. Think about like air pollution, water pollution, light pollution, noise pollution. These are all when there's hazardous things, for example, ending up in our air and water that we don't want to be there. And that is exactly what's happening with plastic pollution. Because of the tremendous amount of plastic that we produce, and because plastic that never really leaves us, it is not simply possible to contain it all. So now plastic is getting into our environment, into our water, our soil, and our air, and it's making its way into our bodies. Now, because this is all relatively recent, we don't yet know fully the long-term impacts or risks to us, but there are scientific studies which have continued to emerge that highlight the links between some of those chemical additives I spoke about a few minutes ago to serious health issues like developmental, reproductive, neurological, and immunity dysfunction, and other problems like obesity and hormone-sensitive cancers. Well, microplastics are everywhere. This is my family, okay? We took a trip to Finland last year. We were up at this red dot, like the Arctic Circle. We are in the middle of nowhere. There's no industry. There's no people. It's freezing cold. So there's really not a lot around. And we took this ship into this frozen sea to get off. We walked around on the ice, and my son found trapped in the ice here a piece of plastic. I mean, we were shocked, although I was very excited to take a picture for these types of presentations, just to demonstrate that, microplastics really are everywhere. They've been found in drinking water, in bottled water, and in tap water, in the studying of indoor and outdoor air, and in our food. So as a result, we eat, breathe, drink, and absorb tiny pieces of plastic into our bodies every single day. And in fact, when researchers look in the human body for microplastics, they find them everywhere. They've been found in the placentas of unborn babies, in our blood, and in our lungs, and even in our brains. And we're working to understand all the ways these get into our bodies, as well as the potential health implications. Now, I know Megan talked about in the last webinar about a recent article that cast some doubt on how concerned should we really be about microplastics in the body. However, we know that microplastics are getting inside of our body. We know that these microplastics contain these chemical additives, and we know that these chemical additives have been linked to human health concerns. And the science on those three things has been clear for quite some time. So even though research is continuing to emerge on this, it seems that it is not as benign, as we think. And I think about exposure to plastic chemicals kind of in the same way I think about wearing a seatbelt, right? Like, I am probably not going to get in an accident every time I go out and get in a car, just like I'm probably not going to get cancer drinking out of a plastic water bottle one time. But why wouldn't I want to just take precautions to be safe? Why would I not want to reduce the risk from plastic pollution in my life and in my community? So all of that, thinking about all of that can feel very scary and overwhelming. And in fact, if you were on one of the previous webinars, you may have left feeling a little upset, because it is very upsetting, because it can feel like we have very little agency over this massive issue. And we might not feel like we have any hope at all. So I'm going to first shine a little bit of light and show you that there is some hope. So I happened to be in Switzerland about 2 weeks ago with my husband, Justin. Here he is. Now, I know he's a handsome guy, but I don't want you to focus on his good looks. I want you to look at the reusable forks, plates, bottles, and cups that we encountered on our trip when we were up having lunch. So this is at the top of a 10,000-foot mountain. And I thought to myself when I saw this, if they can use reusables here, then we can use reusables anywhere. Similarly, I saw some examples of plastic alternatives to plastic utensils at supermarkets in Switzerland and the UK. And I'm sharing this because sometimes it can feel like we're drowning in single-use plastic pollution over here and no one is doing anything. However, other parts of the world are taking action, so let's not give up hope. Now, what do we do? What do we do now? I presented about plastic pollution about a month ago, actually, to a Catholic church group. And in doing that, I was doing a lot of research about the new Pope Leo, who is an environmentalist. And I came across this quote from him that I really liked. It said, "If you want to cultivate peace, care for creation." And I like to think that that not only means peace in the world, but also peace within ourselves. This is an overwhelming issue, but one of the things that's really helped me is to get out there and talk to other people about the plastic problem and also doing things about it. Another quote you may have heard is that action is the best antidote to anxiety. So there's definitely things we can do together to reduce plastic pollution in our world. But I want to make an important distinction between the two types of actions. And I like to call these me and we actions. So most of the time we hear about me actions, things that individuals can do. So I, like many of you, have been told I need to do my part. So skip the straw, bring your bags, carry a reusable water bottle, pick up trash. This is a picture of me picking up trash, actually, in Glen, Ellyn. But the problem with the individual approach is twofold. So one, it puts the onus on you and me to fix this problem. But if you think about all the things that come packaged in plastic, for example, when I go to the store now, I see that they've started packaging flour, like for baking, in plastic bags instead of paper. I never asked for that. I'm totally happy to buy my flour in the paper bags. So now it's my responsibility to figure out how to dispose of this material. And as I said earlier, we can't recycle our way out of this. So the other reason this doesn't work is the sheer volume of the plastic pollution problem. So yes, doing our part to reduce plastic is the right thing to do. And there's many plastic cleanup solutions out there, and I applaud them all. But it's not going to fix this because another 2 tons of plastic entered the ocean in the time it took me to read this sentence. And we need to work as a collective to educate our communities, to take local action, and to push for policy and legislative change at all levels that will curb production on plastic and make us less reliant on this material. So how do we get from just you and me doing things in our own homes to creating widespread change? I'm now going to talk about 3 things I focus on as an individual and as the president of my own environmental nonprofit. And you'll find that many environmental organizations follow a similar playbook. In fact, I think I heard Dana use similar language talking about MRBO. So the 3 things you can do in your community to make a difference are education, taking local action, and advocating for policy and legislative change. Now, depending on the type of person you are, where you live, and what type of changes you want to see will dictate what actions you take. So I'm going to go through them one by one. So first up is education. I think this is truly foundational to understanding any environmental challenge. Right before, so I started to get very interested in environmental advocacy and how I could get more immersed and more involved in this. And I thought about, this is about a year before I started Go Green Glen, Ellyn, and I thought about going back to school because I don't have a degree in any sustainable or environmental anything. And then I thought, well, let me see what I can just learn on my own. But my kids were little. I was like, let me see what I can learn on my own in my own time before I go do a formal education on this. And that happened to be right before COVID. So actually literally 2 months later, everything went online. All of a sudden there was online webinars and online conferences and just a million resources available. Many of these are still available. Of course, there's tons of books that have been written on this subject. And then I also found that just through many conversations, because so many people are working on this and they are so excited. I can speak for myself. Whenever I find somebody who wants to work on this problem with me, I'm so excited to talk to them and more than happy to share information. So you can educate yourself that way. Now, why is education so important? Well, a lot of people are concerned about the plastic problem. Many people simply do not have the right information, or they may lack the time and resources to find solutions that adequately address plastic pollution. For example, as I've said, often the thing that's talked about the most with plastic is to recycle, when we know that that's not really the most effective solution to dealing with the plastic waste problem. It's more about reducing our reliance on this material and reusing other materials. So by educating yourself and others, you can help them to learn and then also help to further amplify that message. And then finally, when you have data and non-biased factual information about an issue, the information can do the convincing for you. You don't need to sway people to convince people to come on over to your side. The information speaks for itself. So for example, when I talk to people about microplastics being found in their brains and hearts and lungs and blood, I see looks of shock and disgust. No one's coming up to me and saying, well, how much is it? And like, where did they find it? Everyone's just like, I don't want that. So people inherently know that this is not a good thing to have these chemicals and plastic in our body. And they can reach that conclusion on their own based on the information I've presented. So what are some ways that you can educate others about the plastic pollution problem? Well, a little bit of that depends on you and your personality. If you like talking to groups, you can do presentations like this one. I've done a number of presentations to schools, community groups, conferences, churches. I've even gotten up and spoken at board meetings in my county and in my village. So almost any opportunity I have to speak, I will take it. And something that I really like to try to incorporate into speaking events, especially live, like ones that are in person, is what I like to call a show and tell. So bringing plastic alternatives that people may not be aware of to an event and letting participants see and touch these things. So for example, we all hear all the time to use reusable bags, but I know that there's many people who still cannot use the reusable bags, and despite the fact that I think there's probably at this point more reusable bags in the world than people. So like, for example, I will always bring, and I have it right here, I'm doing show and tell right now. This is my Chico bag, and I like to bring it just to show people like it's so small, it folds up, you can throw it in your bag or your purse or your car or whatever. So then people are like, oh, that looks like a good alternative. Another one that I like to bring is this, which is maybe a little hard to see on the Zoom, but this is a French press coffee pot. And I got one of those. My coffee maker broke, and I was, I think, doing a lot of learning about plastic at the time and found out about the chemicals contained in black plastic. So I just happened to get a French press instead. So when I've done these presentations, people will come up to me and say, well, what about my coffee pot? Do I have to replace it? And then, but most people don't use a French press. So that's something I bring, for people to see, and then, they can go out and buy it themselves. So this seems really simple, but sometimes people are more willing to make a change if they can actually see what that change looks like right before their eyes. And we want to remove any barriers that make habit changes difficult, because a lot of this does just come down to changing your habits and behaviors. Another great tool for educating others is to host a panel around a particular topic that would include different speakers and perspectives. So for example, you don't have to listen to like me just spiel at you for 45 minutes. You could have multiple speakers that speak about a specific topic. So I was a part of a panel last year based on the film We Are All Plastic People Now. It's a fabulous film. If you haven't seen it, it talks a lot about plastic and the human health implications. And we treated it like a book club. So we had people watch the film before and then come to the panel to listen to speakers present their perspectives. And in our case, it was great because we had myself, a community advocate, we had a local government official there, we had someone from industry, and we also had a student. So we had a lot of different perspectives in the room talking about this issue. If you don't like to get up in front of people and speak, another great thing you can do is to write a letter to the editor. Yes, people still write these and read these all the time. I had one published in our local paper last fall in response to a specialty recycling program that was being established. And I wanted to share my perspective about the concerns I had with microplastics and human health that would not be resolved with this proposed specialty recycling program. So, and I had a number of people reach out to me, not only after the original article, but also my response to comment on it. Now, some things to keep in mind when it comes to education. First of all, figure out what your message is and then stick with it. So when I'm presenting on plastic reduction, I'm generally very focused on reducing unnecessary single-use plastic packaging that comes into contact with food and drink, because we know that microplastics and plastic chemicals can leach into our food. Even though I don't like things like fast fashion or all of the bubble mailers that come with an online order, I'm a little bit less concerned about speaking about that in that moment, because people are not walking around eating out of the bubble mailers. So secondly, if you have an ask, be specific and make it known, but also be realistic. I find it's very difficult to ask people to give up plastic, full stop. Unfortunately, the way our society is, we have lives that we need convenience a lot of the time. Especially, I don't like the term, I also don't like the term zero waste. I find that's unattainable and scary for a lot of people. So I prefer low waste. But for example, if you have young children, or if you have a spouse that, does not bring the bags, the reusable bags to the grocery store, I hear a lot of these stories. And then people are feeling guilty, and then they're not feeling motivated. So I think about it, asking people to change one or two things in their life first, and getting them on board. And then once people see, the results of these changes and that it wasn't that hard, then they become more curious and interested in making additional changes. And then finally, repeat yourself. Repeat yourself. Repeat yourself. Repeat yourself. There is a stat out there that says people need to hear a message at least 7 times before they remember it. I think it's probably even higher now in our hyper distracted society. But I think for people who maybe do this kind of work or are concerned about this issue, you might feel like you talk about it all the time, and trust me, you don't. A lot of times I'm talking to a friend and I'll mention something and they're like, oh, I didn't know that. And I'm like, I haven't told you that because I feel like I've said that 100 times. So just keep repeating your messages. All right, now let's talk about the second pillar, which is action, specifically local action. Why is local action important? Other than it just feels so good to get out there and get stuff done and not just talk about doing stuff. Taking action at a local level, whether that's your school, your church, your club, or your neighborhood, that accelerates and magnifies the impact that you can have just on your own. Now, the world might not notice if I stop using a plastic water bottle for a day or even for a year. But for example, if an entire school, all the students and staff stopped using single-use plastic water bottles, that would definitely make a bigger difference. And in my experience, seeing tangible results also in a community also builds momentum and a sense of community pride. And finally, unfortunately, legislation and policy in some places just isn't an option because it takes forever, or there are preemptive bans on legislation like plastic bag bans, which means the state in that state it is illegal to actually pass a ban on banning plastic bags. And actually, Missouri is has a preemptive ban. When I learned about this, my mind was just blown that there was such a thing. But actually, I live in Illinois, and most of the states around Illinois have preemptive bag bans. So it's very frustrating. And in those cases, taking local action becomes even more important. I also want to just pause for a minute because I know last Thursday, I believe it was, when the EPA came out and they reversed what was called the endangerment finding, which in case you missed this, this basically, there was a finding that gave the government the ability to regulate greenhouse gas emissions because they were found to be harmful to human health. And this decision last week reversed that. So in effect now, the government will not be regulating or have the power to regulate greenhouse gas emissions. And when I heard this last Thursday, I was extremely upset. Sometimes it just feels like I said a few slides ago, like, what are we doing? And is there any hope at all? But yeah, after I absorbed the news, and I think I got myself like an emotional support snack, then I turned back and I actually started focusing on this presentation and other things I was doing and had planned to do in my community, because we can't necessarily control what's happening at a federal level, but we can very much control and influence what is happening in our own backyard, in our own communities, where we can talk to people, where we can be at events and go out and do things. So I just really want to stress why it is so important to continue to work in our communities and not give up hope there. So here are some examples of initiatives that I've led in Glen Ellyn to help reduce single-use plastic waste in the community. We focused on reducing waste at large events, installing water bottle fillers, creating different community reuse initiatives, and also working to prevent the installation of artificial turf. Now, there is a lot of tips on how you can do some of these things on the Beyond Plastics website. So you can go here and check out these ideas and some other ones. And I put a picture in here of this rocker guy because he's got one of our aluminum cups that we used at an event to reduce single-use plastic waste. So I'm going to start there. So it's great to look at in your community events, any event that there is a lot of people, because then there's usually a lot of waste. So looking at those. Now, we at Go Green Glen Ellyn have made a lot of headway over the last 3 years in getting two of our largest community events switched from single-use plastic cups, which were thrown in the landfill, to aluminum cups and cans, which were collected for recycling. So last year, we worked with our Downtown Alliance, which put on a series of 5 summer concerts. They had about 1,500 people attend each one, to use recyclable aluminum cups instead of these plastic solo cups, which had all been thrown away. We applied for and received a grant to help purchase these aluminum cups. And we found a few things with the aluminum cups. So first of all, people really liked them because they kept their drinks cold. So people then would take the cups home to reuse at home for their own events. Secondly, the ones which were not reused were collected for recycling, and we estimate that over the course of last summer that over 12,000 plastic cups were kept out of the landfill. We received another grant to continue that initiative for this year. Now, I know that compostable or reusable options would be even better. We just were not quite there yet, so hopefully that's something we can work towards in the future, but at least this was a step in the right direction. Another initiative we worked on was to transition another event from not only waste to also include recycling. So we have a summer carnival in Glen Ellyn called the Taste of Glen Ellyn. And while I was working as a volunteer in the beer tent in 2021, I had people bringing me their cans and saying, where do we recycle these? And we found out there was no recycling at the event. This event typically attracts 20 to 25,000 people over the course of 3 days. So we were shocked that there was no recycling. We worked with the village for about 2 years, asking them, trying to find a solution. Eventually they said, if you want to do it, you can just do it yourself. So that's what we did. we got the big blue totes, and we created this huge signage here to just focus on recycling the aluminum cans. And then we hired a metal scrapper to come take the materials. And then also over the course of so this was back in 2023, over the course of those 3 years, we also worked to transition from where there was plastic cups and plastic water bottles to aluminum cups and aluminum water bottles. So that much more of the containers that were used at this event were recyclable instead of and also people were not then drinking out of plastic. So between this event and then the concerts, we have gotten over 1/2 ton of aluminum recycled instead. And again, that went to all replaced plastic that was being thrown in the landfill. And metal, unlike plastic, has a very high recyclability rate. Another thing you can do in your community is to look at water bottle fillers. We worked with our local park district to install 2 water bottle fillers at outdoor parks last year. One of them was at a softball complex where many kids played, so there was nothing there. Another one was at a playground that had one of the old ones that you have to drink out of like this, but nobody wants to do that. Everybody wants to use the nice water bottle fillers. So anyway, we got these installed, and this is great because, again, it will cut down on those single-use plastic water bottles that people are bringing. Some other initiatives we launched to help reduce single-use plastic is we launched a community sustainable lending library. We have reusables like beverage dispensers, wine glasses, coffee mugs, platters, plates, things that you might not have around to be used for events. We say between 25 to 75 people. So too small for a rental company, but maybe more than what you have in your house. And the goal is to encourage people who are hosting smaller events like, like a birthday party or a graduation or first communion, something like that, to consider using some reusables instead of disposable. And community members like it because it saves them money. They don't have to go out and buy the disposables, and then they don't also have to store all the reusables in their home. One of our most successful community reuse initiatives is called Sports Swap, where this is where we have families in the community bring gently used sports equipment, and we partner with our park district on this. Bring gently used sports equipment into the park district for about a week ahead of the event, and then they can shop for items on the day of the swap. They get a credit voucher and they can use the voucher to shop. People can also just come in and purchase things with cash or credit card, or you can also just clear out your garage and donate things. Now, I know this is not necessarily the same as, say, reducing plastic water bottles or utensils or styrofoam, but a lot of sports equipment contains plastic, especially all those shoes, all those uniforms, textiles. And so this is a way to reduce the number of items that's getting thrown out or thrown into the landfill. And we've done this the last 4 years. We've done 8 of these. And we've swapped over 3,000 items in that time between the 8 events. We've also started another initiative that came out as a result of this, which is a water bottle rescue. We found that our park district was throwing out hundreds of plastic and metal water bottles every month that got left in the lost and found. And many of these were really nice water bottles like Stanley's and Hydro Flasks and other, very nice water bottles. So we started rescuing them. We took them from the lost and found, we sanitized them, and then we would offer them for resale at our sports swap event. So we estimate, we price them pretty low, like $1 to $5, depending on the bottle type. And we think we rescued around 200 water bottles and found them new homes. Now, again, I know there are some plastic water bottles here. My own kids love drinking out of these Gatorade bottles for their sports games and stuff like that. But again, at least this is reusing, and we're not creating new plastic or bringing new plastic into the world or going out and supporting the purchase of these items. And then another campaign we worked on unsuccessfully was to try to ban the installation of artificial turf at one of our local elementary schools. So the concerns with plastic turf, if you are not too familiar with this, is that it contains a lot of these same chemical additives that we've talked about that are linked to human health issues. It's often young kids that are playing on these surfaces. And then additionally, when the turf is at the end of its useful life, which is typically around 7 to 10 years, then it's all ripped up and thrown in the landfill where it sits forever. There's no recycling or reuse of this material. So we brought all these concerns primarily around the children's health to our school district, and they were listened to, but they were politely dismissed. So I would recommend, if you live in a community where you have youth, especially youth programs, so schools or park districts, or most of us live in places that have that kind of thing, to try to get ahead of this and See if you can maybe even get like a moratorium on it. Just not saying you can't put in turf, but maybe you could put it in, not right now. And then two great resources for this are the Children's Environmental Health Center out of Mount Sinai, and also the Partnership for Healthy Playing Surfaces. Some tips when it comes to local action. So first of all, don't reinvent the wheel. There's a pretty good chance that someone else somewhere in the community has tried to put in place the same thing that you have. So, this goes back to education, trying to learn more about an issue yourself. Find a friend, either working with, a friend to try to make the work a little easier with volunteers, or as I said, we partnered a lot with our Chamber of Commerce and our park district. So by partnering with other groups in the community, that kind of helps to, validate what you're doing and get more people on board. And then finally, expect setbacks and slow progress, but also celebrate wins. Like I said, we had, it took us 2 years before we could even find a solution, propose a solution for this recycling issue that we encountered. And then we're still making progress from there. So, but remember that any attempts to reduce single-use plastic in your community is something that should be celebrated. Okay, so last but not least is advocacy and legislation. I think this one is probably the most difficult, but it's also the most impactful and important in my opinion, because we really do need large-scale comprehensive change to reduce our reliance on plastic and the amount of plastic in our communities. Secondly, lawmakers need to hear from us. I know it might sound a little scary to go and talk to approach some of these elected officials, but they really do work for us. Either we voted for them, somebody voted for them, because that's why they have this job, and their job is to represent us and our interests. So it's important for them to hear from us. Here are some examples of advocacy and legislation that I've worked on. So the first one is petitions. Now, you might be familiar with this in the form of, like, a lot of times an environmental group will have an online petition or an action alert that you can forward, or you can sign yourself, or you could forward and, get others in your community to sign it. We've also, at Go Green Glen Ellyn, we've been working to try to get a bill passed in Illinois that would ban styrofoam takeout containers. And so we just created a Google form where we shared it with our network people here that were in district for our state senator and state representative, and had people fill it out. And then we brought the printed out, names and everything to our state rep. And when she saw this, she was really impressed. It really, really made an impact. I've also collected petitions, like just paper and pen, because then you can go deliver like a stack of those to a lawmaker's office. Again, it really makes a huge impact. Another thing you could do is to organize or attend a lobby day. This is where a large group of people would go to the state capitol to demonstrate large-scale support for an issue. In my case, I've been to Springfield twice now in support of these bills that I'm going to talk about in a minute, to meet with different legislators, and we went with a group of about 50 of us. Lobby day is always really fun, exciting to see your government in action. It's high energy. You're kind of like running around trying to get to different meetings. So that's one thing you could do. If you don't want to trek all the way to your state capital, then you could request a meeting in your district. So where you live, that means that you would reach out to the state senator or state representative's office and request a meeting. I know this may sound a little scary, but in my experience meeting with them, they are all generally friendly, and they do like to hear from their constituents. So you would contact their office and request a meeting to talk about the specific issue or topic. Usually the meetings are pretty short. They're only about 15 minutes long. So you want to be prepared for what you want to talk about and ask them for. And you also want to tell them why this issue is important to you. You don't need to necessarily know like every fact and figure about everything plastic related. Just tell them, why you don't want plastic bags in your community, or why you don't want styrofoam in your community. And then you would ask them to either support legislation that's already in existence, or you may even be asking them to help to draft a new piece of legislation to be introduced. So Beyond Plastics has on their website a number of sample bills, some sample legislation that you can visit this link and get ideas from. So I'm going to go very quickly through 3 examples of legislation that you might want to look for in your state that would address the single-use plastic problem. And I've been working on all of these in Illinois with a group called the Coalition for Plastic Reduction, where again, we are speaking to our lawmakers about supporting legislation that reduces single-use plastic waste in the state of Illinois. So the first one is a ban on polystyrene foam foodware, aka styrofoam. There are so many alternatives now to styrofoam. It is really one of the worst of the worst. It can't be recycled, and it contains the chemicals styrene and benzene, which are carcinogens that we know leaches into food and drink when the material or when the food or drink is hot. So in Illinois, we've been pushing for the last 5 years or so to get lawmakers to pass this bill. We're really, really close. It passed the Senate last year, the Illinois Senate last year. We're just a few votes short in the House, so we're really, really hopeful that it finally gets across the finish line this session. The second one is a plastic bag ban, which the draft legislation in Illinois would ban plastic checkout bags, and it would create a 10-cent fee on paper bags, which would go back to the retailers. Now, this bill is tricky, again, depending on where you live, because some states, like I said, have these preemptive bans where you cannot ban plastic bags in your state or municipality. I know Missouri, unfortunately, has a preemptive bag ban. So, it would be against the law to propose something like this. Now, I did see that there was legislation proposed a few years ago to reverse the ban on bags, which it did not advance, but that would be like the starting point in a state with a preemptive bag ban, is to first get rid of the preemptive bag ban. So if you live in a state like this, then it's even more important, again, to push for that local action in your community, because, okay, well, there can't be a law passed, but there's still lots and lots of education and taking local action and getting people to avoid using plastic checkout bags. And the final one that we're working on here in Illinois is what we like to call skip the stuff. It makes plastic cutlery, straws, like sachets, all those other items that you don't want in your food takeout bag, but end up in your house and then they just get shoved in a drawer. It would make all those items by request only. So again, there are examples of all these bills on the Beyond Plastics website, and it talks about the sample language that you would want to look for. And then finally, I just learned about this bill. This is so exciting. Missouri just introduced a bill that would phase out the use of single-use plastic products at Missouri state parks and historic sites. So this was just introduced just not even 2 weeks ago. So there's 2 things I loved about this bill. So one is that it has bipartisan sponsorship. I mean, that is just awesome. We never see that. So kudos to Missouri for that. And then also, it was a result of advocacy by the Streams Team United and the Missouri River Bird Observatory groups to get this legislation proposed. So bravo to you guys. That's really exciting. And I'm excited to watch this bill and hope to see it passed into law later this year in Missouri. So good luck. And I'm sure Dana will have info on how people can get involved advocating for this legislation. Just some tips when it comes to advocacy and legislation. So first, this is the most important in my opinion, is to share, but don't scare, and definitely don't shame. Even though our lawmakers work for us, at no point, if you have a different point of view than your elected official, should there ever be any name calling or saying things like, you're giving people cancer, things like that. That is just totally ineffective and will immediately shut the conversation down. I've had meetings with lawmakers where I have to go back sometimes multiple times, and it's not always friendly. But this goes to my second point, which is just to continue to be respectful and persistent. and share why this is important to you. Be factual. Bring facts, bring information from non-biased sources, but don't ever make anything up. If you don't know the answer, just say, I don't know the answer and I have to get back to you. And then finally, you can also bring diverse voices, including the opposition to the conversation. Spending time to speak with people who don't necessarily agree 100% with you on an issue can help you learn where there might be an opportunity to compromise that would have to be built into the policy or legislation. And then that way you can ultimately get more people on board to support it. So in summary, the best way that we're going to be able to influence change as a collective in our local communities is to educate ourselves and others, to take local action, and to advocate at a state, local, and federal level for policies and legislation that will reduce single-use plastic production and pollution. And here on my last slide, I have some links and information. I have my group, Go Green Glen, Ellyn. I have also links to the Coalition for Plastic Reduction, which has good info even if you don't live in Illinois. And then Beyond Plastics, which has a number of webinars and trainings. They were really instrumental in my plastic pollution education, so I highly recommend you check them out. And this is my personal email. You can also always email me with any questions. And I'm happy to take questions now as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacqueline. That was just great summation. Every time we have a different speaker on this topic, it's so cool to see different perspectives and ways that it's like all brought together again on this common thread of the series. So thank you for that. We've had a bunch of thoughtful questions here. I was looking at the Q&A. A few of them are focused on incentives around glass, whether recycling systems or manufacturers receive support to use the glass instead of plastic. And there's also a question about the industry perspective, particularly about the representative from We're All Plastic People Now discussion. So several questions center on reuse systems, where funding comes from the reusable cups and the refill stations, and how they might shift away from single-use plastics. And let's see what else. And finally, there's a question about the sport swap and the timing of that. So that's kind of the summation. I don't know if you're able to access the questions or not in the
Yeah,
Q&A. Yeah.
I'm looking at them. Okay, so I'm just going to go from the bottom up. So where did we get the grant from for the reusable cups? That was a community grant that we requested. So it's a foundation that's local here to Glen Ellyn. And between the two, last year and this year, it was with the cups and the signage and the bins and everything we needed to buy, it was about $10,000 per request. They are significantly more expensive than plastic, unfortunately, at this point. So, but yeah, so if someone wants to email me about the grants, I'm happy to share more specific information about that. Let's see. There's the workshops. Maybe I'm not looking at the right thing. I think I'm seeing a lot where everybody is, but not necessarily the questions.
Yep, down the Q&A button there. Should be about 6, little red 6 down there. If not, I can read them off to you, no problem.
Oh, here it is. Okay. Does the glass recycling industry receive any funding incentives? I don't know the answer to that question, but I can investigate. Are food manufacturers incentivized to use glass containers? I don't know the answer to that. Don't know the answer to that question either. That is good. Can you share more perspectives about the perspectives you heard from the industry person? So the industry person who was at our panel, she was I think the co-founder of Melioria cleaning products. So I don't know if you all are familiar with that, but it is they make laundry detergent and other cleaning products. And her perspective why they package in cardboard. And she said the reason why they chose to package in cardboard was because they were trying to make like the safest laundry detergent on the market. So she said it didn't make sense for us to work so hard to make this product that was supposed to be safer for individuals and then package it in plastic. So that's why they used cardboard. Let's see. I work with an organization that provides food for pets of unhoused people currently bagged in plastic. How can I convince the organization to use reusable containers? That's a great question. Sometimes I think I like to propose pilots. So just say, let's try this. A lot of times you can get people on board if you say, well, let's try this for a month and see how this works. If you are able to provide them with the reusable containers, so it's not something that they have to buy, like an additional expense. A lot of times it comes down to that too. Like, what is the additional expense or the additional administrative cost of this? So maybe speaking with them about like, could we try this and what are some of the challenges? That could be a way to at least get the conversation rolling. What's the best time of year for the sports swap? We do it in the spring and in the late summer. So we do it like basically ahead of spring sports and then before kids go back for fall sports. And how many municipal polystyrene bans are there in the state of Illinois? I think there's only a couple. I think there's only one or two communities that have banned styrofoam in Illinois, I believe. I'd have to look up which ones, but I thought that Oak Park maybe just did it. So we don't have a statewide ban. That's why we're trying to get a statewide ban. We do have, I think, 7 or 8 communities that have some kind of a plastic bag, including the city of Chicago, but most of them are not a ban. It's like a fee on bags. So that's part of why we're trying to get a statewide ban, because then it eliminates this kind of patchwork of, okay, well, in this community, you have to pay 10 cents for a bag, but this one you don't. Just make it a little bit easier. Let's see. Okay, Illinois. I read Illinois has a ban on the purchase and distribution of foam foodware with in-state agencies and facilities. Yes, that is correct. However, there is still foam, we know, like in the state capital of Illinois, because it also, the timing, the way the bill was worded, it had to do with the timing of like when the contracts were ending. So yes, but it hasn't been completely phased out yet. And then someone asked a question. I don't know if this is a question or a statement. It is better for the environment to have a grass lawn instead of artificial turf. Yes, I guess, yes, better to have a grass lawn. I mean, better to have some natives and plants mixed in there as well. But I have a grass yard, and I also have a lot of native plants in my yard. And then what about the black plastic tarps that people use in their gardens? Do they break down and cause problems? Is using cardboard a better solution? That's tricky to answer because I think some of that, like, we don't know, right? So if you've used like the weed covering, like those black plastic weed coverings, I don't think anyone's going back and like testing the soil later to find out if there's any kind of, if that's making its way like into our groundwater and stuff.
Jacquelyn, I actually was just recently, 2 weeks ago, maybe, at a Missouri Organics Association conference, so like state level conference for organic farmers. And there's research going on at the University of Missouri on that exact thing.
Oh,
And they're
good.
like they're doing soil testing and stuff. And like it is not, not like super positive and optimistic results. Like, yes, the weed barriers are kind of breaking down into microplastics and they're being found in soil and probably being uptaken into crops.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, research still forthcoming, but maybe precautionary principle on that one.
Yeah. So stay tuned. And then, is the pink cardboard foam insulation used in styrofoam bans? No, the styrofoam ban is that's been proposed in Illinois is specific just to takeout containers. So it also doesn't include like egg cartons. It doesn't include like meat trays. It's just focused on takeout containers for now. And then adding medical and recreational marijuana to your action list because it's consumed by people in pretty high impact for packaging. No, we have not considered adding that to our action list. But so I think that's all the questions.
And vapes are really, really concerning.
Yeah, I know.
It's not something that I know like a huge amount about, but it's like a lot of disposable plastic.
And you see it like at a park, like at parks or just in the street, and yeah, there's lots of problems. It's the plastic, it's the liquid nicotine, it's the lithium batteries. I mean, it's just It's like a minefield.
Yes.
So yeah, I think that's all the questions.
Jacquelyn, since you teed that up so kindly, that was so nice of you to talk about the new Missouri bill. Just really briefly, so it does exactly what Jacquelyn just said about ultimately phasing out concessionaires of our state park system using single-use plastic. It also would repeal the preemption ban on plastic bags. So that is part of it as well. And everyone on this webinar and that is registered for all these plastic webinars, please stay tuned because we are, and when I say we, I mean MRBO and our partners at Missouri Stream Teams United, Mary Culler, Emily Young, who are also on this webinar right now. We are developing a really solid plan for how we might at least move this bill forward. As Jacquelyn mentioned, that part of things can be frustratingly slow. Oftentimes things don't go through the first year that they're even introduced. But we're gonna make it happen. We are not gonna have a plastic bag preemption law in Missouri forever. And we're going to reduce single-use plastics throughout as well.
I think that tackled all the questions there. Thank you very much. A lot of compliments here in the chat. Everybody really got a lot out of it.
Great. Thanks everyone for having me.
Thank you.
Keep me posted on your email me at your if you get any local plastic initiatives that you're successful in. I'd love to hear about it.
Will absolutely do. I think there's a lot of alignment between Illinois and Missouri going on right now. So thank you for sharing what you all are doing.
Awesome.
All
Thanks,
right.
everyone.
If no more questions, good night, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.